Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. Coming up on today's show, we bid farewell to former US President Jimmy Carter, reflecting on his economic legacy and global influence. I'll be speaking with Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, to unpack the lessons leaders today can learn from Carter's approach to economic challenges. And I catch up with Toyib Adewale for an in-depth look at immigration in the UK. We'll break down the latest policies shaping the landscape and what they mean for Nigerian professionals and students alike. Then later, I'll be throwing back to a conversation I had with Nnamdi Nduka-Eze, CEO of the Motherland Hub, on how Africa's young diaspora is leading innovation and shaping the continent's future. But first, King Charles III's New Year's Honours List has been released, recognising achievements across public service, sports and the arts. Gareth Southgate receives a knighthood, celebrating his leadership in guiding England to the Euro 2024 final and his wider contributions to English football. Controversial pick Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, is honoured for his services to public life. His ongoing leadership in housing, transport and environmental reform continues to shape the capital's trajectory. And in the arts, Stephen Fry is knighted for his exceptional contributions to broadcasting, literature and mental health advocacy. With over 1,200 individuals recognised, the list reflects a wide spectrum of achievement, from grassroots initiatives to high-profile public figures. Well, for more on the broader significance, our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey provides additional insight. Happy New Year to you, Simon.
Happy New Year.
It's been a quiet start, albeit very cold. It's very cold where we are in Westminster. I suppose the only big news going around now is who didn't make it onto the King's New Year's Honours List. Every year there's always a bit of controversy about who's made it. What are the big names this time round?
Well, we've got, exactly, over 1,200 people. This comes from across sectors, so quite a few sportsmen and women from Team GB who did well in the Olympics, who won medals, quite a few from the charity sector, quite a few politicians, and that's usually, as always, where the controversies start. And so we've got the Sadiq Khan, who's the Mayor of London, who has won his third mayoralty. He's the only person ever to win 3 mayoralties in a row. This is going to be his final term. I think there's a limit. There's a 3-cap limit. But I think that's where the controversy is. He's London knife crime has gone up under him. There's a lot of issues around housing and homelessness, and so a lot of people are saying this is rewarding failure. I think it was always fairly obvious he was going to get it, and it's also quite a few Conservative MPs have also been awarded. So for people at home who don't understand or don't know, the Prime Minister or the Labour government advises the King. Advises meaning they tell the King.
Give him a list.
They tell the King who to give knighthoods to, who to give CBEs to, who to give MBEs to, and so Sadiq Khan has been given a knighthood. Conservative Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has said that this is a rewarding of failure. But Emily Thornberry also been awarded. Mayor Andy Street, the West Midlands, where Andy
quite popular.
And Nick Gibb, the former schools minister. So there's quite a few politicians that have been awarded. But then
what
also
does it mean?
Well, I mean, you get to call yourself a sir or a dame.
I
mean, it doesn't mean that
Privileges?
much. I think there might be a couple of things but it's we live in a very class-based system here in the UK.
We do.
So
upgrades at the airport.
Exactly, yeah. So I think having it would be quite nice to have that before your name but it doesn't really mean that much, and it's one of those old sort of traditional antiquities that we have here in the UK.
Yeah.
But quite a few other sort of nice stories about people who gave a lot to charity or who did spectacular things.
Yeah. Gareth Southgate as well.
Gareth Southgate, obviously.
That's deserving.
I
He's
think
now a
pretty
sir,
deserving.
right?
He is a sir, and he sort of changed the culture, I think many people would say, within English football, and made it okay to be
cry.
Failure isn't the be all and end all. We remember him missing his penalty, and then coming back and then leading the team out, and didn't win any major trophies, but came very, very close. So exactly, you've got Stephen Fry, and I think the idea is, well, one way of looking at it is that you can fail in life in certain areas, but you can come back. So Stephen Fry went to prison for stealing credit cards. He was expelled from numerous schools.
Goodness.
And yet he is now awarded in the News Honours List and is a household name. And Gareth Southgate missed that penalty and was hated by many England fans for that, but then came back to be a great manager. So
that's right, and he got it before David Beckham.
He did, and that's another controversy. That's the time for a thing for another time. David Beckham's been trying for a long time to be a sir.
Allegedly.
There we go.
Allegedly. But thank you, Simon. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Back to politics next week,
Indeed.
I'm sure. As we begin this new year, we also reflect on the legacy of former US President Jimmy Carter. His time in office, though shaped by economic challenges and energy shortages, remains an important case study in leadership through crisis. Carter's presidency saw the implementation of major energy conservation policies and efforts to combat inflation, lessons that resonate deeply in today's economic climate. Beyond his time in office, Carter's humanitarian work, including initiatives in public health and diplomacy, helped redefine the role of former presidents, influencing US relations across the globe. Greg, it's such a pleasure speaking with you on Channel's Business Global again. Thank you for bracing the cold, and happy holidays.
My
You're in
pleasure.
London.
Happy New Year. Yeah, spent Christmas here. All good.
Really, really good. I suppose people are still reflecting on Jimmy Carter. We got the news, sadly, before the end of the year that he had passed away at the age of 100.
Yeah.
Typically at this time, even in death, people dig holes in people's characters. I've listened to all the obituaries. I haven't yet heard anything bad about him. Could you just put into perspective who he was, what type of president America will remember him and the world by?
Well, I think the most obvious is the longest living president ever, right? To make it to 100 is a feat for anyone, but especially a former president. And I think his legacy will be mixed only because he was the president at a very difficult moment in America. And so it might not have, some of the outcomes from the late 70s weren't necessarily his fault. And maybe he mismanaged a couple of different situations. But for the most part, it was a difficult time in America before he took office, right? You had inflation, you had problems in the world. So yes, there might have been some mistakes that he made, but for the most part, a lot of those problems he inherited from the prior administrations. Unlike now, where a lot of the problems that the country is suffering have been in many ways self-inflicted wounds by the Biden administration or by the people running the country. So I think the legacy of Jimmy Carter will be great, nice man, not a great president, but I think his legacy will also include, more importantly, what he did after the White House, the next 50 years.
How do you remember him?
Well, I remember because I was, in my late teens when he was president. It was a really difficult time. And, what most will remember is his famous malaise speech, where in July of 1979, the country was suffering from inflation, from recession at the same time, which many economists thought was impossible. You had problems in Iran, obviously, with the revolution, and the American hostages, and major problems in the Middle East as well. And you also had the Soviet Union that was misbehaving, to say the least. And these are all very similar to the problems we have today. But he made the malaise speech in the summer of '79, and instead of offering, a real positive solution, he basically blamed Americans in many ways and said, we're too consumerist, we're too negative right now. We're suffering a crisis of confidence, he called it. Whereas I think the solution with the next president was, if you want more oil, let's pump more oil. Yeah. If you want a better economy, let's liberate the economy.
That optimism that you could only get in a Hollywood star.
Yes, and if you want to beat the Soviet Union, what Reagan said was, we win, they lose.
Yes.
And again, Carter, he had some of the legacy of Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon. Remember, Nixon is the one who started the Environmental Protection Agency, which conservatives really dislike. It was Ford who was having real problems with inflation, and détente, which was the idea of working with the Soviet Union instead of against them, of just sort of, can we all get along? That was a Nixon strategy, détente, and Carter continued with it, and again, it wasn't his fault, but Reagan came in and said, they're the evil empire, we win, they lose. and we're going to liberate the private sector in America, which is what he did.
How do we reflect on some of his legacies to where we are today? We're saying off air, legacy media's dead, that we're here, we've got a camera here, just one camera, got a nice backdrop. That's all you need these days. You said that Carter, not a great president, but a great man, and it's his legacy that people are going to really remember. Is that missing from today's politics? I know you're a Trump man.
Yeah, sure.
And, he said some negative things, but then also people do care about personality. Personality politics cares, but also being a nice person. Where's that today?
And again, Jimmy Carter started a lot of the great things that Reagan continued, right? He brought Christianity back to the White House. He was an evangelical Christian. That was very unusual. He was also an outsider. The prior presidents from after World War II up until Carter, they were all inside Washington people.
Interesting.
And he was a governor from a small state. And he paved the way for people like Reagan and Trump, that an outsider.
The ordinary folk.
Yes, and he was a peanut farmer from Georgia. And so, he brought, religion back to the White House. He brought, some sense of moral, I wouldn't call it superiority, but just moral decency, leadership. And that continued. And so a lot of people recall the 80s revolution as the evangelical Christians, the evangelical right coming to Washington. They actually came earlier, and that was Jimmy Carter. And so, and then he also did something that Reagan capitalized on, which was bringing human rights to the forefront of foreign policy. And that was very much a Jimmy Carter thing. And Ronald Reagan leaned on that. And he mentioned human rights in just about every notable speech, often being critical of Iran and being critical of the Soviet Union at the time. So a lot of the problems we had then, we have now. But I would argue that Joe Biden created these problems.
Oh, here we go, Greg.
They're fixable. I think they're really fixable. And there's a real optimism in the U.S. right now about the opportunity.
I want to talk about that before we go, because of course there is going to be a state funeral for Jimmy Carter in I think first week of the New Year's. Another big event happening.
8 days.
The
and a holiday, and
a holiday, and national, which is well deserved. Got to talk about the inauguration of Donald Trump. We haven't spoken for such a long time. What is happening in terms of his administration, his policy, his picks? There seems to be a spat at the moment with, we thought, who was the chosen one? Elon Musk. Elon Musk and the visas. What's happening, and what can we look forward to in the new year from Trump?
Yeah, I think a little bit of division, a little bit of competition in any administration is good. That's a positive thing. I think in 2016 and early 17, President Trump was new. Nobody really knew what to expect. It was new to him. He probably didn't have the Washington experience at the time to select people that would be, both loyal to him but also loyal to the
capable and culpable.
Yeah, and now I think you're seeing that. Right now, his nominations all his nominations are polling at 59%. That's unprecedented with Trump. He himself is polling over 50 for the first time.
Can we trust the polls?
There's a real, I think you can. I mean, within a few points.
Okay.
Look, he's never polled prior to November. He never polled over 47 in his first term. So this is a good sign that people are optimistic about his administration.
Are you optimistic?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, look, it might be too much optimism, right? Actually effectively delivering on a lot of promises is always difficult. But I do think there's real optimism, and I'm quite confident that a lot of the problems are solvable, right? We have crime in cities that it's really worrisome to people. You've got basically a surge in crime, a surge in homelessness. Inflation has been sticky. You've got hostility to the private sector that can be relieved quite quickly. And so with deregulation, the border has been a big issue. That's definitely fixable. And so, I think these are problems that are quite solvable. And that's the great thing about optimism in America. We had that in 1980 and we have it again right now.
Just very finally, we are in the UK. We're just sitting outside where the seat of power is, Westminster. There has been some suggestions that perhaps the UK-US special relationship is dying. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a speed bump. I think there were some problems in the last few years. You had some disagreements. You had a few cases where the prime minister here felt he was being ignored by the president. President Trump loves the UK. I think that's going to be a big change versus President Biden. And then, of course, you have, we're not going to have an election here, or very unlikely to have an election here for 4.5 years. So
wow.
I think the president will understand that.
Yeah.
And we'll have, I think there's, also a great relationship between Nigel Farage from Reform and President Trump. That'll be to the great benefit of Keir Starmer and
we're going to have to discuss that, and then of course bring Kemi Baden on in that, who I'm sure, as you know, has annoyed a lot of our viewers and lawmakers back home. But that's a story for another day.
Also fixable.
Greg Sorensen, also fixable. I love this optimism. Thank you so much for joining me
Great
on
to
the
be here,
show.
Juliana.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I called up with Toyib Adewale for an in-depth look at immigration in the UK. We'll be breaking down the latest policies shaping the landscape and what they mean for Nigerian professionals and students alike. And I'll be throwing back to this conversation I had with Nnamdi Nduka Eze, CEO of the Motherland Hub, on how Africa's young diaspora is leading innovation and shaping the continent's future. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from right outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. As the UK transitions to a fully digital immigration system this month, millions of foreign nationals will need to adapt to new ways of proving their status. This shift, while aimed at streamlining processes, has sparked concerns about potential glitches and access issues, raising important questions for the Nigerian community, which continues to play a vital role in sectors like healthcare and education. With visa policies evolving and restrictions tightening on student dependents, the landscape for migrants is changing. Nigerian professionals and students remain critical to the UK's workforce, but the digital transition could add new layers of complexity. Toyib, Happy New Year. It's a pleasure having you on Channel's Business Global. It's always a very popular segment when we talk because, of course, so many of our viewers are still interested in coming to the UK despite, some would describe it as a hostile immigration environment. Would you describe it as that? What would you say are kind of the big talking points from 2024 that students and professionals need to be aware of when it comes to immigration, migration laws in the UK?
I think globally, throughout the West, we can say immigration has been a hot topic in 2024. And like you said, the environment seems to be becoming more hostile. Here in the UK, we have the Conservative Party and the Reform Party. Both of them are trying to see who can come out with the toughest laws, and you also see the on the other side of the Atlantic with Donald Trump winning the election, immigration is a huge talking point. Even in the last couple of days, we've seen that it's a huge talking point.
To be fair, across Europe.
AFDB in Germany and all of that, we can see it is still a talking point of immigration. But when we now look at the immigration that benefits the country, we still know that there is a huge shortage in a lot of industries. So do we still want highly skilled people to come and fill in these positions? We have HS2 going on. We have the plan by the government to build 1.5 million homes over the next parliament. You still need
the NHS, which Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has said
advancements in medicine and healthcare means people live longer. That means there is more demand for people that work in the healthcare sector and in care. So as much as it is a talking point, we would like to distinguish between the skilled migration that the country needs and whichever part of migration. You talk about the students as well. I was reading recently, it's on the House of Parliament website, NHS surcharge alone in 2023-2024 gave the UK government £1.7 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Just to explain to our viewers, what is an NHS surcharge and how much does that cost?
The NHS surcharge is literally the amount of money you pay when you are coming to the UK on a temporary visa, like a student or work permit. You have to pay that money in advance for you to be able to use the NHS. So if you are coming here for 2 years, you pay for 2 years of NHS surcharge, which is about £1,035.
Goodness me.
That means if you're applying for a 2-year visa, a 2-year student visa, a 2-year work visa, you have to pay £2,070.
Exactly. And that contributes over £1 billion, as you were saying.
What? Just in 1 year, £1.7 billion.
It's a lot of money. So we are contributing, but it doesn't feel that way. Do you still are you still getting DM'd by students, professionals living in the UK that are feeling a little bit ostracized, feeling targeted by the rhetoric? Because, you know, sometimes we see it online and we don't take it as personal, but some of these attacks are quite personal, aren't they?
I mean, we saw it physically with the rhetoric coming on when we had the riots in the UK. And a lot of people were thinking, like, if a student comes here and they pay like median of, let's say, £15,000 to do their masters, they pay application fee, they pay the NHS charge, like we're talking about 2,000 plus, just the NHS, and they are coming here to better themselves. They were invited here because the government wants the UK to increase educational export. You know, they want that money to come in. So if you're looking at school fees alone, you're looking in the region of about £9 billion.
Goodness.
If you look at some landlords will not rent to students unless they pay several months in advance. So even myself, that I'm resident in the UK, I can't afford to pay several months in advance.
Absolutely.
But students pay this money.
Yes.
Workers pay this money because they don't have that credit history and all of that. And then when they now come in, they just want to work, they want to contribute, they want to look after their family.
But there are opportunities available and there is help and support, which is, of course, what you do with your consultancy. Thank you so much and Happy New Year, Toyib.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me.
And now to my final topic. Africa's diaspora is driving innovation and shaping leadership pathways across the continent. I recently spoke with Nnamdi Nduka Eze, the CEO of the Motherland Hub, about how initiatives like his upcoming Motherland Summit are creating opportunities for African youth and bridging leadership gaps. The discussion centred on leveraging digital economies, cross-border collaboration, and how the diaspora can play a more prominent role in policy influence and social economic development. Nnamdi Nduka Eze, thank you so much for joining me in Westminster. It's a very windy day. I know our viewers won't be able to. It's so windy, but season's greetings. It's really nice to get out of the studio.
It is.
And really, I think at this time of the year, all of us look forward to what's going to be happening over the next 12 months. And I've got to say, considering just how much the world has changed in 2024, so many elections and results we weren't expecting, we didn't really hear much from the youth. I think you may disagree with me, but talk to me about how you are going to convene the youth. I know you've got the Motherland Summit coming up next year. Talk to me about those plans, what's happened this year and what you hope is going to happen from the African youth within the diaspora in 2025.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here in Channel's windy London, Miss Juliana, and it's I wouldn't say the youth have been inactive. I'd say perhaps we've been quietly planning for the new year. There have been a lot of elections, you know, as you know, and I think there's perhaps been a general feeling that there are different types of avenues that youth can use to take initiative. There's the political sphere, but there's also the economic sphere. And I am COO at Motherland Hub. We're a very young team. We started about 18 months ago. And our mission is to transform brain drain from the African continent, the flight of top quality talent, into brain gain. And how we do that is we work with, we're building relationships with stakeholders in the African continent. We're building our cloud platform so that stakeholders in the continent can contact and work with talent from the African diaspora and source solutions and innovations from this talent without necessarily the need for relocation. So we're really focused on youth economic leadership. There are different avenues, as I said, but economic leadership can then lead to advising on policy and what needs to be done in different fields. So the youth aren't inactive, we're quietly planning. As you alluded to, we have our annual summit, Mount Motherland, coming up in February, on February 8th, Saturday, February 8th, at London School of Economics and Political Science. That will be the Youth Forum. And on February 9th, on Sunday, that will be at another partner, SOAS, a University of London. That will be the summit proper. And the Youth Forum is a very good chance to gather together youth, young innovators in the diaspora who are determined to drive innovation on the continent. You know, the time I think has come that we begin to see Africa and the diaspora as one big loop. And we are at Motherland are very firmly confident that we can turn the youth in the diaspora into Africa's global workforce. Practicality is our primary importance, is our primary focus. And the forum, first of all, the Youth Forum, let's start with that. Obviously, I know we have a lot of important people from the World Economic Forum, head of Africa, the head of the World Trade Organization, who will be coming for the summit proper. So that's Mr. Chido Muniati, head of the head of Africa at the WEF, and Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, head of the World Trade Organization. But even focusing at the Youth Forum, first of all, there are a lot of really young, enterprising people there who are in the diaspora, or international citizens, as we like to call them. So they're not permanently based on the continent. And they have businesses that are impacting the African diaspora and also impacting the continent, who will be speaking. I think it's important, first of all, that we activate the mindset of young people in the diaspora, that they begin to see that, hey, I can be out here, but I can be directly working with partners on ground. I mean, we have people like Izzy Obeng, who is the CEO and founder of Foundervine. And they do a lot of great work supporting and accelerating startups from the African diaspora in the UK, but also helping entrepreneurs in Ghana. We have people like Hamid Ibrahim, who's the CEO and founder and co-founder of Kugali Media, who, as you know, partnered with Walt Disney Studios a couple years ago to produce Iwaju, which is about the futuristic Lagos. And he's a Ugandan CEO producing a show about futuristic Lagos, but he's over here. We're excited. Yeah. We think community building, innovation, brain drain, and turning that into brain gain. These are, as you can see, passionate focuses of mine. Not easy things to do, we know that, but we're building strong partnerships, I say, with NITCOM, with the Royal African Society, and with other stakeholders, and we're determined to push forward.
Well, I can feel your optimism. It's very infectious and really insightful as well. Thank you so much, Nnamdi Nduka Eze. Of course, you'll be on the show, hopefully in the studio.
I will.
Where it will be warmer, giving us more.
I don't have to wear this.
You won't have to wear that. Well, maybe not. But giving us more insights.
If the heating is not working, then I'll go.
Yes. The UK too does have its problems, but at least the African diaspora, as you quite rightly said, we just get on, don't we? We get on and we push forward. What a great positive message to end the show. Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Happy New Year.